either live by the gun or you die by the sword.
Welcome to the Good, the Bad, and the Weird Shorts. I'm Nicho.
And I'm Chris.
And we had a little bit of a kerfluffle today.
I fucked up.
We had previously agreed this was going to be a weird short to begin with because we did try breaking out of our mold. We were going to try and find a romance movie.
We did. We tried to break out of our mold.
And everything that kept in the list of like romance movies that kept getting suggested to us, one movie kept popping up called Dragonslayer.
Doesn't look like a romance movie. And I looked at Dragonslayer and went, yes, that's what I want to watch. I envisioned into my mind a Conan the Barbarian looking dude mixed with some lightsaber-esque moments, big 80s text across the bottom. And so you watched Dragonslayer, and I forgot the name Dragonslayer, went onto Amazon and found Beastmaster.
Yes.
And so I watched the wrong movie. But also, I think the fates aligned because I didn't know what Beastmaster was, despite my love of terrible 80s movies.
Yeah.
Somehow Beastmaster had just never been on my radar. I don't know how. I don't know how I've ever missed this movie. So why don't you tell me about Dragonslayer, the movie I was supposed to watch, and I'm going to tell you about Beastmaster, the movie you need to watch.
Well, Dragonslayer is a 1981 film. It's kind of in that weird era when Disney was doing other stuff rather than your typical Disney movies.
Yep.
This was Disney and Paramount Home Video together.
I like a Paramount movie.
And so it's a weird one because it's kind of like it has a similar feel of graininess to like The Watcher in the Woods.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm. Lots of practical effects. I mean, it's basically about this village that's being attacked, or they have to sacrifice a virgin to a dragon every year in a lottery. Otherwise, the dragon will rise up and take over or rebel, whatever.
Okay.
And they come to a wizard for help, and the wizard ends up dying in the first 10 minutes of the movie.
Ooh.
This is like a 2-hour movie,
Oh, yeah, no, mine was also 2 hours long.
And so it's up to his apprentice and his old servant to bring him, or to go and slay the dragon now.
Ooh.
My little notes on the movie is that the wizard has a dope hat and outfit.
I like a dope costume.
Kind of like, my awesome wizard shirt that my parents hate.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like
that.
It's that level of, not as colorful, but that level of wizardry.
A good 80s wizard.
Yeah. And the assistant looks like a Hobbit wannabe.
Yeah.
Just appearance-wise.
Yeah, the fashion choices were Hobbit-esque.
Yes.
Yeah.
Practical effects are pretty awesome for the time.
Okay.
Some of them, especially towards the end, get a little bit green or blue screeny, where there's a little bit of an outline around stuff.
Yeah, didn't clip it quite close enough.
Or they're at a weird angle, somewhat looking down, but it's all clouds behind them. It's
a good anime butt shot.
Kind of, yeah. I mean, it's an early 80s film.
Yeah. Yeah. No. I watched the same vibe. Don't worry.
No, I'm pretty sure because the
posters are very similar.
Yeah, Beastmaster has popped up for me every now and then too. But yeah, I don't know. Dragonslayer, I will say you will love it.
Yep.
Your husband will hate it.
Yeah.
My favorite part of it is they employ what I call piddly magic.
Okay. I like a good useless magic.
Yeah, basically, there's one...
Gandalf has useless magic.
Even more useless than some of Gandalf's magic.
At least Gandalf was a glow stick.
Which is helpful. This one, the assistant becomes a bit of a snob after he gets a little bit more power. And he starts taunting the servant by, there's one part where he's he magically lifts up his backpack, makes it circle around him, and then he derobes him, and it's like it's piddly magic. It's like
dumbass magic.
It's like in My Hero Academia, where there's the one guy who can like stretch his fingers out a little bit longer,
just a little bit.
The mom can create that small little gravity field to make small objects come closer towards her.
Yes, that I won't lie. Dumb superpowers / magic abilities is one of my favorite questions to ask new people.
Mm-hmm.
My personal useless superpower would be I would like to be able to change lights from yellow to green,
mm-hmm.
but like not in a convenient sort of way. Just like when you count down from 3, I would like them to like 50% of the time be correct.
Oh. We've played this game before of like, what's the stupidest superpower we can think of?
Yeah, because my husband thinks very practically, and so this was one of the ones, and I still ask him this, and I'm yet to get a good answer from him, because the only superpower he's ever thought of that he wants is he wants to be able to fly.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, okay, well then you can fly like 2 inches off the ground.
Yeah. Little piddly stuff like that.
Like, useless things.
Yeah.
Like, all of my blacks in my wardrobe match a little better. Not great, just a little bit.
Or you can all talk to cats, but all cats hate you.
Or, yeah, you can talk to cats, but cats can't talk back to you.
I like that one.
That's the level of dumb superpowers that I love, and that's... Beastmaster falls real good into that category, by the way. Like, the magic in Beastmaster's similar vibes to Dragonslayer. Actually, so this is part of the problem, because you were describing the movie to me, and the reason no red flags ran in my mind the entire time I watched Beastmaster, and then proceeded to watch part of the second one, and a bunch of reviews, and a bunch of background knowledge, and to do research on Beastmaster, is because everything you just said, minus the dragon, is Beastmaster as well. And so when you were talking Disney, at no point did I read through, I was like, oh, Beastmaster, like, it doesn't say Disney on it. But, like, there was a period where Disney wasn't big onto branding itself on things.
Well...
Like, they put their name on the logo and call it a day. And the version of Beastmaster I watched, I discovered ended up being a Korean ripoff of the movie, because it never really properly made it to DVD.
Oh.
So I just assumed that the reason there was no intro card was because, like, it was a Korean ripoff that I had managed to get my hands on.
Ah.
It still was a Korean ripoff that I managed to get my hands on. It's not a Korean ripoff as, like, Korea remade the movie. They just burned it onto a disc.
Yeah, and it just happens to be what they have left of it.
Yeah, there is a Blu-ray remake, and I can talk about those later if we feel like it, because I did watch both versions of this movie. So I didn't ever connect that it wasn't a Disney film, because part of Beastmasters is there's comedic sidekicks who happen to be animals. It has, like, a very 80s Disney vibe.
Okay,
like, there's parts of it that also are, like, legitimately would scar a child, where you're like, okay, so, like, this was Disney trying to be adult in the 80s, but there's still an animal sidekick. Yeah, why not? No, it's not Disney.
Yeah.
It's not Disney at all.
This Disney doesn't have it, or doesn't have the talking sidekick, but the one thing I was surprised about on this one, 2 full butt shots and a side boob in a movie with a Disney label on it.
And see, you told me about the boobs and the butts. Beastmaster's entire costume department revolved around different versions of bras. There's a scene where you get to see 2 full sets of boobs, nips and all. And you spend 90% of the movie looking at men's thighs and butts. The costume design was very similar to Conan the Barbarian. Where, like, everyone's pretty much running around in their undies. There's an entire village that looks like Monty Python's version of the Middle Ages sort of vibe, where people are just wearing garbage bags, pretty much. And, like... There's just people who are legit just wearing a rag, and they've not even, like, properly tied it. It's not like, oh, I don't have much money, let me try my best with... It's like, here's a rag, wrap it around your groin and tuck it into your belt and call it a day.
Good.
Like, the main character, his signature costume piece is, first off, a pair of loin-style undies.
Mm-hmm.
With a leather belt that has a bunch of other leather belts hanging down from it, but not enough to, like, cover him like a Roman sort of vibe. Like, put about an inch of space in between each leather strap. It's mostly there to hold his giant sword up.
It sounds like some Final Fantasy level costuming bullshit.
It really is. So when you had mentioned there was boobs, I saw boobs in mine too.
I specifically mentioned side boob.
There's a lot. Dude, watching the whole movie's mostly side boob. Do you have boobs in this movie? We're gonna make sure the boobs are like emphasized. Like I said, everyone's wearing rags in mine, and except for the women who all are wearing either no clothes, but they are because you know this was supposed to be a children's movie, I think. So, like, they still have things to quickly put over their boobs if a man on screen happens to approach.
Oh, no.
I know. But the rags that everyone else is wearing, the women also are wearing rags, but the rags have somehow been suctioned onto their body, like Kim Kardashian at the Met Gala. And also there's, like, a full bra built into their rags.
I'm not familiar with the Met Gala.
Well, you don't need to be super familiar with all of it, but let me show you Kim Kardashian at the Met Gala, because this is kind of what the women look like.
All right. I'm a bit oblivious to that. While you're doing that, I will say that I thought the costuming for Dragonslayer wasn't bad.
No, and and the costume's bad, but like it's 80s bad. It's like it's got a Conan the Barbarian vibe.
Yeah.
And so, like, I was in my head thinking that this was Disney's interpretation of Conan. Okay, this is Kim K, and the theme for her at the Met Gala was she was supposed to be, like, wet, and so there's, like, little jewels hanging off of her. Her hair was supposed to be, like, made to look wet and everything. Everyone thinks she just looks like she, like, But this is legitimately what the main character's love interest, who we later find out's his cousin,
I mean, it's the middle age, or it's fantasy. It's not like they're going to not do it.
Oh, yeah, she's also, like, one of only... Okay, so, like I said, there's 2 sets of boobs, right? I have no idea what happened to second set of titties.
Okay.
She, like, swims off. The ferrets, who are the sidekicks, steal her bra, and she runs away to try and get it, and I never see her again.
Fascinating.
As far as I'm aware, that woman is dead. Oh, there is one other thing that you should know about Beastmaster.
Oh yeah, what's that?
So Beastmaster's supposed to be kind of like it's Conan-esque, so it's got that fantasy fiction, kind of got a role-play-y sort of Dungeons and Dragons vibe to it. Similar to your movie in a way. Where it's trying to be serious. It's like, it's not supposed to be like, but like at the same time, it's not.
No, so Dragonslayer isn't like that. I think the thing you'll appreciate in Dragonslayer is that the world is set in a land where magic is kind of dying.
That is
nice. Christianity has a bigger part of the movie too.
Okay.
Like it's kind of this weird fantasy movie where, like I said, the magic's piddly, but it's also magic that can slay dragons. That's the whole reason they went to a sorcerer or a wizard to get their problem solved. But I don't know. I like these concepts of like and why I kind of want to get back into get into the Narnia series, because you do mention that
the magic dies.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Beastmaster has similar magic rules for what it sounds like as Dragonslayer. Mm-hmm. But it shows magic, and it shows the magical characters and creatures, and their designs are creative. I'll give them that. I wouldn't call them good. They're definitely nightmare fuel.
But, I'm okay with nightmare fuel.
But I will say I haven't seen something like it before. But where yours is focused on the magic being part of the solution to the problem.
Yeah.
This one, the magic is more of like just there and accepted, and we're really here for some sword swinging.
Okay.
Some sort.
So is it set on Earth, or is it set in another world altogether?
Not clear.
Not clear. Okay.
No real otherworldliness is ever explained, but it also at no point says it's not Earth.
Yeah, I was just curious because I actually recently learned what the difference between fantasy and high fantasy is that fantasy takes place on Earth and high fantasy is in a world of its own.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I would say this one's probably in the fantasy realm just because they don't try and go too otherworldly with it.
Okay.
So the first character that you should meet is the witches. The witches have beautiful, sexy bodies, and, well, this is their heads. Beef jerky face. Real bad.
The extreme butterface.
Oh, it's real butterfacey.
Well, I mean, I won't complain there. I mean, hell, I watched that shitty movie Werewolves on Wheels, and that was one of the best parts, is that there was a chick that flashes herself, and even my mom admitted she wasn't bad.
Yeah, no.
But her face.
Yeah. The Beastmasters is so 80s it hurts. This is the main characters. They're cousins.
It looks like He-Man meets knockoff Xena.
Yeah, no, that's exactly the vibe of this whole movie.
Which, if you haven't seen the live-action He-Man,
need to.
It's so bad.
If you even remotely found joy in He-Man, you need to watch Beastmasters. I love He-Man. I even love the cartoon. I've watched almost all of it. And not when I was a child either. I watched it in, like, college. And so, like, if you find this sort of stuff hilarious to you, if like the over-the-top 80s, the over-the-top macho-ness makes you giggle, this movie will make you giggle.
Okay.
It tries very hard to be serious, it tries very hard to take itself seriously, but it also doesn't want to be... Like, it was clear they were trying to distinguish themselves. Mm-hmm. So the main character's entire distinguishing point, and this won't ruin anything for you knowing this, because it's made clear almost immediately with a very weird intro scene, which you will find fantastic.
Okay.
But I'm not going to ruin for you.
Good.
You just need to watch it, and there's questions. There's a lot of loopholes and problems in this storyline to get to where we got that part. But after that part, the main character gets superpowers, and his useless superpower is that he can communicate with animals through his mind.
So he's like a shitty Aquaman.
Yeah, actually, that's how another person who reviewed the movie described him, as he's a shitty Aquaman. But he doesn't seem to be able to communicate with all animals, because there are a lot of horses and ponies in the movie. He never talks to any of them. He has a hawk friend. He has what they in the first movie, what they are trying to portray as a Black Panther. However, panthers are really hard in real life to train. They're very aggressive.
One could say you can't train them.
I would argue you can't train a panther. Yeah. So it's a tiger that they've spray painted black. I'm not shitting you. It's a real life tiger that they.
It makes me think of
black.
like old ass Star Trek, where like the dog is just wearing a wig and a tinfoil horn.
No, this is very Star Trek-esque, and there is a dog at one point. The dog's not on the movie for very long because in the story the dog is no longer needed. It's clearly a husky dog with a bad haircut to make it look like a wolf. Like a white wolf. Because, like, we can't have a normal wolf. That's too normal. It's got to be like a 13-year-old boy's idea of cool.
Which is not cool. It is never cool.
So he's got a hawk friend, which it's like an eagle hawk. Which he does verbally at throughout the movie. He has this panther, which is actually a tiger, which is actually a normal tiger spray painted black, that he uses as his strength. And then we need some type of comedic relief because that's not enough. So he also has what he describes as his cunning. It's two normal ferrets. That he finds in the middle of, like, what looks like Utah.
Is it like Zaboomafoo level? Where, like...
No, they don't talk back ever.
Huh.
They are very real, normal animals.
And they don't do any voiceover or anything? It's just...
No, there's not even, like, underlying dialogue for you to read on screen.
Well, I just... I don't know. From what it sounds awfully bad.
It is. But... However, it has 2 sequels... And it ran for like 60 episodes on TV.
Jeez.
And that was after the movie. The movie came first.
Dragonslayer only has Dragonslayer. Because I didn't do too much looking into it after it.
That's fair.
I thought that we were going to do a short on...
Dragonslayer and not we might revisit Beastmasters in a full episode next year.
I might have to give it a go. But yeah, what I will say about Dragonslayer is that the practical effects are awesome. The dragon's dope. See, I don't want to get too far into Dragonslayer because parts of it are actually really good and there's kind of like twists and turns that are like that I can't really talk about. But I just realized Dragonslayer is like what I would compare it to is it is a Disney-fied Hobbit.
Ooh, okay.
Kind of.
We've got like a quest story going on.
Quest to kind of slay a dragon.
Accidentally slay a dragon.
This, instead of accidentally purposely slay the dragon.
Okay, they're trying on this.
They're trying to. That's the goal, instead of like going to the mountain and like, oh, dragon's still alive. What the fuck is that?
That is actually what he looks like. That's not like a fan thing. That's legitimately a scene from the movie. There are a lot of interesting bad guys in my movie. I'll just put it at that. And this is one of them.
By the way, Chris has photos pulled up.
Because I can't verbally describe to you some of the things in this movie to like entice you to watch it.
There is a guy in this who looks like the shirtless gimp with spikes from Pulp Fiction.
Yeah,
but more muscular.
Yep. He's not the only one. There's a whole army of them. He
looks like a custom character from like the old WWE games.
Yes, he does. I will give Beastmaster this, and I don't know if yours did this, but it feels like an 80s thing because a lot of 80s movies that I like that are in this genre do this. They take time to explain almost everything, but at the same time they leave enormous holes in the plot. Example, they explain to you how this creature comes to exist, why he's dangerous, then you get to see him being dangerous, but you don't ever at any point get any more information than that. You just know where he comes from and that he's gonna get you.
It's like the shit they did in Suicide Squad, where it's like, here, we're gonna introduce these 5 characters, they're gonna get like 15 minutes each. Oh, here's these 3 characters. You got a minute to learn who they are.
Yes, I don't remember a single person's name in this movie. I don't remember what this thing is called, but I will never forget him, nor the vampires that are in this movie.
Well, actually, you mentioned if it was just an 80s thing, but I'm kind of curious too, because you've dived more into the fantasy genre than I have.
It is one of my favorite genres, right behind Kung Fu.
I'm just wondering, and you've also read more fantasy books than I have.
It takes up most of my library.
Was this based off a book, or were they expecting you to know some of the book? Because I know that's kind of how Lord of the Rings feels at times, where
Lord of the Rings is the worst at it. I would agree there.
Yeah, but also he explains absolutely everything.
Yeah, I will say that for the most part, 80s fantasy movies tend to take the approach that you probably don't know anything about the world, even if there is a book. Because sometimes there's a book. Not always. A lot of the times there was no book whatsoever. Yeah. If you were lucky, there was a TV show that it was based off of. But we're going to really roughly do a version of that. Think Mad Max had a TV show. Very loosely ties into the new movies. Okay. Almost not at all. Honestly, we could kind of ditch the whole TV show and it would be the same. Okay. So, for the most part, the 80s, a little bit of 70s, fantasy, high action, sort of macho movies, this is kind of, the 2 that we watched, a good sample of what you can expect. Yours, a little more polished. Mine, a little bit more chaotic.
Chaos is good.
It is good. However, both live very happily together in the same genre. No one's too far out in left field in this genre, which is something that I like. I like genres where everything's kind of nicely tied together. Could you make arguments for subcategories? Of course you could. But, at the same time, no one's going to look at your movie and be like, oh, that's supposed to be a punk movie? It looked more like this to me. No one's going to do that. Okay. The other thing to know with 80s movies, and yours might not have had this problem as much as Beastmaster, because it sounded like yours, pacing-wise, was a little bit better done than mine.
Yeah, I would say the story as it unveils it's pretty good.
Yours actually, has some twists and turns, it sounds like. There was some writing done.
Yeah, no, there's an actual overarching plot instead of oh, now we're at the end.
Beastmaster, and this is kind of one of those things, 80s movies in general lie between, again, these two movies' extremes, where there is a plot, there is some writing. It might not be good writing, but, someone took time to think things through. The pacing might be weird.
Okay.
But, like, it's there. They tried. They're experimenting with it. And then, like, kind of towards the later 90s, we start to see fantasy with, like, some good pacing.
Okay.
And, like, some solid plots and worlds that don't have giant holes in them.
So trying to translate, like, how we've talked about previously and how you can't translate across medium super well.
Yeah.
It's just like, well, we had a book. The book was good. What do we remove? What don't we remove?
Yeah.
And it's just finding that balance in between.
Yeah, and 80s high fantasy and 80s fantasy in general, especially these two, which are arguably in the campy vein.
Oh yeah, this one's definitely campy.
This is my bread and butter. This is
yeah.
Like don't get me wrong. There's 80s movies that are fantasy that aren't ridiculous, but I think the 80s was trying really hard to figure out how to tell these really elaborate worlds with the very limited technologies and budgets and casts that they could get. Because this wasn't the, like, popular genre.
Yeah, it wasn't like, there hadn't been something like Star Wars that had revolutionized the space genre.
Exactly. Like, there wasn't anything before this that people, like, an entire generation of people saw and was like, oh my gosh, that's life-changing.
It's not like Lord of the Rings for us.
Exactly. Like, to be fair, one could argue that this entire genre had to wait for Lord of the Rings to show up before, like, people started taking fantasy seriously.
Because the versions we've seen of Lord of the Rings,
I love it.
I didn't know until I met you that there were 2 Lord of the Rings movies before the Peter Jackson trilogy.
Yeah. Oh, they're gold. If you haven't seen them, warning, they're terrible. But, like, they're not that bad.
Yeah.
Like, they took the book very seriously.
Yeah.
Which was part of the problem for fantasy is, like, both of ours are written very much... They probably would read as a book better than they watched. Like, you'd probably get a better sense of the costumes, the worlds. The dialogue wouldn't be as terrible. My dialogue was awful.
Yeah.
Like, on the verge of, like, if this was to be remade in nowadays, some things would have to change because we've got some molesty parts.
Oh, yeah. Mine doesn't have any of that.
Which is good.
But the one thing I will say why probably I would actually recommend Dragonslayer is because there's actually something different and a little special to it. Like, I will say it is somewhat based off a old fairy tale or old story of, like, St. George and the Dragon or something.
Yeah, okay. That makes sense.
But...
like, loosely.
Very loosely, but there's more of... it's not your typical Save the Princess. I mean, it is Save the Princess because they're trying...
And also it's in the 80s.
Yeah, but it's also not at the same time. Like, there's elements to it that the story is there for that, but they don't take that route. It's like when I watched Guy Ritchie's adaptation of Arthur.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, he's going to hook up with the witch at the end, and then they don't, and it's like, I'm glad you didn't take that route. You could have easily made it campy. Yeah,
there's a lot of, while still being campy, I think, experimentation in these 80s fiction sort of movies, which is part of what I really like. Like, there's a lot of prop use that later on down the road is something that, like, when it's used well now, we really enjoy. Like, there's some elements in Beastmasters that I can see directly influencing some of the movies from the 90s. They're not fantasy movies necessarily. Some of them are horror. Some of them were, Halloween specials. Some of them were fantasy.
Yeah.
And some of them were TV shows even, that now, looking back at it, I remember being like, wow, that's so cool. They probably got inspiration from these movies.
Okay.
They're, like, it's not experimenting in the way we think of it now, where it's like, wow, that was way out there on a limb.
It's not Mandy.
It's not Mandy. There's a lot of subtle experimentation in these, which is why a lot of us like watching all of them. Because, they're all the same, but there's enough difference.
Yeah, there's something to pull from each one.
Yeah, and...
Well, yeah, and like
Yeah.
for me, when I was watching Dragonslayer, I have this fascination with people trying to cover stuff up, especially Disney, because they try and paint themselves as like this super PG company.
They've erased a lot, or tried to.
Yeah, well, I found this, and then I found Watcher in the Woods.
Oh, that's a good one.
And I'm like, because I didn't realize like Disney made horror films at one point.
Yeah.
And I mean, not great horror films, but still, like, would this stuff ever come up on Disney Plus? Which I'm sure if they do, because there's already some movie that came out where Chick's a mermaid or something, and they CGI'd like the very end, and the hair looks awful.
Yeah.
And it's just like, okay, you know, I understand you're trying to do a family platform, but
it's bad.
Like,
yeah.
Because as you know, or actually, I don't know if I've told you about this. I learned a while ago, probably in high school, that Disney made propaganda for the U.S.
Yeah, they did.
Against the Germans. I learned, and I've stumbled upon it recently, Looney Tunes.
Looney Tunes has some gold ones.
Made propaganda against the Japanese, and it is extremely racist.
Oh yeah, no. They were... There was a very sense of over-patriotism that both companies really felt the need to lean into at the time. And now looking, you know, hindsight's 2020, except for now, because 2020 is a terrible year.
Yeah.
But, like, there's something to be said about that, though, because, like, my movie...
Disney's was to avoid bankruptcy.
Oh, yeah. They had that problem a couple times.
Yeah.
But there's also something to be said with, I think, the question nowadays of whether or not these movies... Because I think a lot of people who love these movies, because both of our movies have become something of cult classics in their own right. Yours maybe a little less than mine. Mine has more to work with.
I don't know about that. I know mine, I hadn't heard about it until we were trying to find a romance movie, which, if we had watched it, it is a romance movie
mine
in a
too.
way,
It's
too.
just really gross romance. It's absolutely disgusting. But both of ours, when I was doing my research, both of ours and a bunch of others came up as things that people watched as kids. And not just like, oh, I watched it when I was in middle school, which is probably the age range that I would say mine is targeted to. Like, if you were going to target it. Nowadays, not so much. But back in the day, I would assume that this is when this would have been like a middle schooler's sort of target. Maybe some high schoolers.
Horny teenagers.
Yeah, that's who this probably was targeted to. But a lot of people that I was reading who were re-reviewing it or revisiting both of our movies distinctly recall these being some of the first movies they ever watched at like the ages of 4, 5. Where like nowadays, I don't know if parents would necessarily put this on for kids.
I watched Jurassic Park too young.
Yeah. I understand that.
Yeah,
I also watched it too young, but it made me want to be a paleontologist.
Same here. Well, I mean, I think that's something to be said about the endearingness of movies, is that there's that special tie to it. Like, Pitch Black has that special tie for me. Alien. Like, all these horror films that I saw way too young.
Yeah, and I would argue that the big name ones, especially Disney, of course Disney, but I think a lot, even Warner Brothers to as heavy extent, there's definitely nowadays more of a sway to age-appropriate movies. And that age-appropriateness is slowly becoming more and more idealized and regulated, which I don't know if necessarily that means that movies like these will ever be revisited in a new way.
Yeah, or like shown to kids. Like...
Yeah, because like mine legit has 2 full sets of titties just hanging out there. It's not even like a titty slip. Like it's just full on boobs in mine.
What is yours rated, by the way?
I have no idea.
I am curious on that now.
What's yours rated?
PG. Because PG-13 didn't exist until Indiana Jones.
Bless Indiana Jones. Let's find out.
Yeah. Because yours might be a little bit older.
Mine's a year after yours.
Well, I mean, older age rating.
Age range.
Yeah, and I mean that's a whole nother rabbit hole about censorship versus PG.
Mine's rated PG.
Huh.
I don't think nowadays it probably would have gotten... Well, no, there's no bad words in it.
Yeah,
And
I don't know.
The titties are not being sexually tittied. They are just tittied in some water.
They just exist.
They are existing on a pair of females.
Yes.
Which is where most boobs exist.
I've seen quite a few men.
Yeah. There are also boobs on the men in this one. They are just rock solid, and they are up way too high.
Yeah, I don't know. I think...
But at the same time, I would say I would say that maybe these are things that we need to start revisiting. Are these very terrible, very campy movies? Because I honestly, for a lot of us, the horror movie genre, we started way too young and now we can't stop.
Yeah.
I started the terrible kung fu and 80s, one of the first movies I remember is Mad Max Thunderdome. Mm-hmm. Arguably not a children's movie.
Yeah.
Did I understand what was going on? Not really. But, I understood enough that, they were bouncing around on bungee cords trying to kill each other.
Yeah, I haven't seen it yet still, so...
It's in the same...
Okay.
The same blood runs through its veins. It's just in a very different body.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I think that's kind of part of the reason we started this channel, too, was just to talk about old films and just films in general and how things have been changing. Just because I remember... and that is the thing with rating systems, and not just rating systems, but also censorship of stuff and how that's changed over time. Because I remember watching, I think it was Hell House with my dad.
Yeah.
Full frontal nudity.
Yeah, there is.
I mean, but that's in the 60s and stuff, and we assume, in the 80s, people started becoming more conservative. We have the Satanic Panic picking up, and... Yes,
but also, I don't know, I feel like the true... the full-on, censoring down of movies, I think that's an even more recent development.
No, it definitely came in the 90s, that more so happened with the rise of the hip-hop genre and being brought over to white culture, the rise of violent video games, not just video games, violent video games.
Yeah.
And, I mean, that's a whole nother rabbit hole.
It really is. But at the end of the day, would you recommend your Dragonslayer movie?
To a general audience, probably not.
Fair. Fair.
I mean, there's some parts to it that are cool and well done, but I think have been done better in other movies. It's an odd curio in watching a Disney movie like that, just because of Disney trying to wipe away their...
They would really like you to remember Frozen too, not the old stuff.
Yeah, exactly. But for someone like you and me, I would recommend giving it a watch. It's not one... I mean, it's going to stick with me, but it's not going to be one that I'm going to go and revisit again. For me, it's a one and done.
Fair.
Maybe go back and rewatch the dragon effects, but that's about it.
Fair.
How about you? What about Beastmaster? Or the Beastmaster?
The Beastmaster. The first one. For a general audience, no. Beastmaster's probably too campy. It's definitely way too silly, despite the fact that it's supposed to be a serious movie. However, if you are like both of us and you like a campy movie, if you like a fantasy movie, and especially if you have a little love corner of your heart for dumb 80s macho stuff, this movie's fantastic. I will be watching the second one. I am going to make my husband watch it so that we can talk about it together. I'm going to make you watch it. I'm going to probably watch it 4 times this week.
I'm going to watch them on my own.
Yeah. I'm probably even going to try and get through the TV series, even though it is apparently a longer TV show that, I don't know, I guess I was too busy watching Columbo to pay attention to Beastmaster. Yes, I have seen all of Columbo.
I don't even know what Columbo is.
Oh, dear sweet child.
My knowledge of TV is very limited.
Columbo is broader than TV. Columbo is a lifestyle.
Well, I'll get to it at some point. So, question for you then on the Beastmaster.
Yeah.
Would it be better watching it alone or drinking with friends?
It depends on who you are. You're gonna love this movie even by yourself.
Okay.
Like, this movie is gold. There's a lot of actually well done and thought out things that are just bad because it's the 80s and they didn't have a huge budget.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also a lot that is just dumb.
Okay.
And that's one of the things that Beastmaster, I think, part of the reason why it became a bigger cult classic than some of the other ones, like
Okay.
the one that you watched. However, will our friend group as a whole be forced to watch this movie? Yes.
Awesome. It'll be fun.
Even the one who's really excited about romance movies, even she gets to watch this movie.
Romance.
There's romance in this movie. It's just weird cousin romance.
Hey, different time.
I guess.
Hey, that's how all the royalties are related together. They were all cousin fuckers.
In their defense, they are royalty.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess it's fine.
Anywho, this has been the Good, the Bad, and the Weird Shorts.
Thanks for listening.
Peace. Hope you liked a little bit of a weird one.
Oops.
Whoopsies.